With its 11th mobile operating system, Apple continues to add desktop functionality to the tablet version of iOS. But instead of actually merging it with macOS, iOS 11 builds on an already mature foundation, with an emphasis on adding new ways to get work done on a tablet. The phone version doesn't get quite as many new, shiny features as previous major updates, but it does get new augmented reality capabilities, a redesigned control center, camera and photos app improvements, a revamped App Store, Apple Pay and Messenger, an enhanced Siri, and the new Files app, to name a few. iOS 11 has been honed to a fine edge, and it's never been sharper for the iPhone. On the iPad, it feels almost experimental in the best way, with intriguing possibilities for the future. The seeds of Apple has been using the phrase "it just works" since the days of Steve Jobs, and that's a generally accurate description of the company's sleekly designed products. The phrase "this is how it works" may be more accurate, though. Instead of iOS magically meeting your needs before you have them, it just works. iOS presents a few basic principles that dictate the entire iPhone and iPad experience. This is how it works. Swipe from the middle to search, swipe from the top for notifications. Tap on the app to open it. Change your Wi-Fi network from the Settings app. Some of these fundamentals date back to the release of the first iPhone, having been iterated and added to in the intervening decade. View all 14 photos in Gallery. Apple has always been methodical with its software releases, introducing gradual changes and no doubt following some hidden map of the future. This is particularly true of iOS, whose last major visual upgrade happened all the way back in 2013, when Apple ditched skeuomorphism in favor of a flat and bold look for the operating system. iOS 11 is very much in line with that tradition, adding a few visual tweaks and a handful of new features. It's familiar, and most people will know where everything is. One of those gradual changes has been the slow evolution of iOS for iPad as a separate but related species to iOS for iPhone and the iPod Touch, sort of. Previous versions of iOS began including a few additional features that took advantage of the iPad's increased screen real estate, like picture-in-picture and split-screen dual apps. Although many of the new features in iOS 11 are coming to Apple screens of all sizes, many seem intended to bring the iPad and, specifically, the iPad Pro, closer to the level of a full-fledged laptop replacement. But after spending time using iOS 11 on the largest, most powerful iPad currently available, our verdict is that it delivers an experience unlike either a laptop or mobile device. And maybe that's okay. Apple certainly likes game-changing, courageous moments, like doing away with physical media at the headphone jack. What's happening on iPad seems more experimental, and we're curious to see how it shakes out as more people try out this new experience. Can your device run iOS 11 and over-the-air update to iOS 11? And its updates is available for most current iOS devices, and many older ones, too. If you're looking to get iOS 11, you'll need a 6th generation iPod Touch, an iPhone 5 at a new, or an iPhone SE if you're not into big phones. As of this writing, all sizes and versions of the iPad Pro can run iOS 11, along with the iPad Air and Air 2. iPad minis as far back as the Mini 2 and 5th generation iPads are also getting the new OS. We tested iOS 11 on both a 12.9-inch iPad Pro and an iPhone 7 Plus. Apple has always done a great job with quickly getting its latest mobile operating systems to the masses, far better than Android, with its fragmentation woes. While this accommodation of past hardware is commendable, there's a hitch when it comes to compatibility for older iPhone apps and iPad apps. With the move to 64-bit only support, iOS 11 rings the death knell for many older apps. If you're concerned that you'll lose functionality of an app, you can go to Settings, General, Applications before performing the upgrade to see which won't work. If you check there after upgrading, you'll see the list of defunct, useless apps. Those with new versions on the App Store appear first. As for the rest, you're encouraged to contact the developers to convince them into updating their apps. After upgrading to iOS, Michael found a dozen defunct apps on his iPhone, to which he had to sadly bid adieu. Among those is the sensational Flappy Bird, which will reportedly not be upgraded to iOS. Fly away, sweet friend. In general, we found that iOS 11 felt smoother than previous versions. Apps spring open. Objects slide naturally across the screen with a flick. But it's not all buttery smoothness. There are many anecdotal reports of phones and apps crashing more often after upgrading to iOS 11. That said, we didn't have those experiences in our testing. The latest upgrades. Apple has a well-deserved reputation for fast adoption and frequent operating system updates. The first major release for this version, iOS 11.1, for example, included a fix for the much-discussed crack problem. This is a series of vulnerabilities that could have allowed an attacker to breach the encryption on Wi-Fi networks. The security component of iOS 11.1 was important, but more people probably noticed the 70+ new emoji. These include a genie, a giraffe, and a vomiting face. But none of that matters because two dinosaurs have joined the veritable Noah's Ark of animal emoji. Truly, this is a great day for iPhone users. Meanwhile, 11.2 saw the introduction of a new system for sending money between individuals. Called the Apple Pay Cash. It's built directly into Apple's excellent Messages app. We cover this and other updates in greater depth later. Apple has continued to push out system updates at a steady tempo. If you're keen to get in on the leading edge of Apple's releases, signing up for the iOS beta program is a snap. Best of all, your beta updates are delivered over there without any confusing fiddling with settings. Productivity prowess. Perhaps the biggest visual change iOS 11 brings to the iPad is the improved dock, which is also key to the tablet's new productivity powers. A dock-like thing has always existed in iOS, and it harkens back to the very early days of OS X and even earlier with the Apple Launcher in OS 7 and the venerable Control Strip. In the iPad version of iOS 11, the dock not only stores your favorite apps, but it also shortcuts to apps that are currently in use. This is similar to the taskbar in Windows 10. Most importantly, you can swipe up from anywhere in the OS to summon the dock. As in macOS, the iPad's dock resizes as you add or remove apps from it. It also displays opportunities to interact with apps on other Apple devices via continuity. The company recently introduced split screen multitasking to the iPad, which lets you run two apps side by side. With iOS 11, you can still run apps side by side, but a new feature called Slide Over lets you drag an app out of the dock to place it over another app in a sidebar, which you can then snap to a resizable side-by-side window. Unlike split-screen apps, Slide Over apps share the focus. Both are still in use and accessible, making it a breeze to move back and forth. Tap the top to slide the app to the left or right side of the screen, and flick it up to move it out of the way. You can also tap and drag the Slide Over app to the edge and move it into a split-screen view, similar to Windows 10's Snap Assist feature. Slide Over takes some getting used to, but it makes some remarkable workflows possible using this combination of Slide Over and split screen. It felt similar to working on a laptop in our testing, but with the focused feeling that comes with using mobile apps. And iOS 11 keeps Slide Over apps always within easy reach, thanks to the dock. Drag and drop functionality. You can easily move text and files from one app to another with the new drag and drop functionality in iOS 11. This might not sound like a stop the presses type of feature since Apple popularized the concept in its early desktop GUIs, but it's a rarity on mobile devices. Even on Android, Google has only implemented a kind of drag and drop to select multiple items in its Google Photos app and nowhere else. Drag and drop works as you'd expect in iOS 11. Tap and hold a file or text, and it will stick to your finger. You can then drag the item elsewhere to another app, a text field, or an app icon in the dock. Lift your finger to release it and open it in the app or see it pasted in the text field. There are some unique twists to drag and drop in iOS 11. For one thing, you can add multiple items by tapping them with another finger without lifting your first finger. It's a subtle but very smart and unique feeling way of using multi-touch that works with either one or two hands. You might expect drag and drop to work with text and photos, but you can also tap an iMessage balloon and move it onto the Maps app to start a search, for instance. Another example, layers of a mobile Photoshop project can be grouped and moved in the Photoshop Mix iOS app. Though drag and drop is implemented throughout iOS, not everything can be dragged and not every place accepts a drop. The onus seems to be on the developers to make their apps accept drop to images, text, and so on. The challenge to the user is going to be recognizing the new places to try this feature and finding out where it works. Windows 10 tablets, such as the Surface Pro, offer a full desktop or laptop experience and have had this functionality for a while, for any file type. The new Files app. One of the most critical productivity improvements in iOS 11 is the new Files app. As the name implies, it's a file picker app for iOS, and it graces both iPhone and iPad. This is the first time that iOS has given users access to files on the devices in this manner, and it's a watershed moment for that reason alone. You can move files, create folders, and even create nested folder structures. Alternatively, you can use color-coded tags and rely on the integrated search function to find your files. Files has sections down the side for favorite folders, tags like those in macOS, and locations, including local device storage and iCloud Drive. Keep in mind that, by default, macOS includes iCloud Drive as a top-level folder location. This effectively bridges your iOS and macOS devices through Apple's syncing services. If you're not down with iCloud Drive, the Files app also supports third-party cloud storage services, including Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, and Adobe Creative Cloud, among others. Note that Files doesn't let you see every file on your device. The Apple Cloud service needs to enable viewing of appropriate files. So forget about looking at system or program code, for example. With slide over, drag and drop, an enhanced dock, and the Files app, the iPad iOS 11 work experience is dramatically improved. Finding and accessing assets for, say, an illustration is easy, and moving them into an editing app is a breeze. The iPad Pro was already a remarkable creativity device with the Apple Pencil, and iOS 11 brings a familiar, yet novel, experience that meshes the experience of a drawing tablet, a laptop, and a mobile tablet. Whether that experience justifies the comparably high price of Apple's Pro tablets is another issue, especially with the burgeoning market for convertible and 2-in-1 devices. Worth 1,000 words in the Photos app. Live photos, which are really just 3-second videos, get some nifty new effect possibilities: loop, bounce, and long exposure. The first repeats the short, 90-frame video endlessly in a vine-like fashion. Bounce may be the most fun effect, repeatedly reversing and forwarding the motion. And long exposure is great for things like fireworks, waterfalls, or moving traffic. You can now scrub through the mini video to choose which frame appears as the still version of a live photo, and you can trim the beginning and end off the short videos. The Camera app also sees some subtle improvements to picture taking, but the surprise addition of automatic QR code identification is most welcome. Behind the scenes is iOS 11's adoption of the more efficient HEIF and HEVC formats for photos and videos. These can save you storage space to the tune of 50%, but note that only the iPhone 7 and later a 2017 iPad Pros can record in these formats. There isn't yet much of a software and service ecosystem to support HEIF, but we expect the clout of Apple will push it forward. The new portrait lighting options in iOS 11 only work with the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 10 models, and at launch, they're still designated as beta. They join an improved standard portrait mode, which uses those phones' telephoto lens and software magic to create a bokeh effect. There are two of these examples of computational photography wizardry in addition to the basic natural lighting settings: stage lighting and contour lighting. The first is most impressive, removing the background and replacing it with black. The other two identify facial features and switch up lighting for more evenness in the case of natural, and more vignette around the face in the case of contour. Apple has made the quality of its camera a key selling point, going so far as to make posters and billboards out of pictures shot on iPhone. Google countered strongly with its Pixel phones in 2016, which used some machine learning wizardry to produce incredible images. The Google Photos app brought additional force to bear with excellent search and effectively bottomless storage. Apple is striking back hard, and the special portrait lighting options debuting in the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus are sure to turn the heads of many shutterbugs. Out of control panel. Apple's success has come from its consistency and elegance, but we were left scratching our heads over the new notification lock screen combo and control center in iOS 11. Apple has seemed to struggle with access to shortcuts for fast actions, such as toggling radios and flashlights on and off, and that's still true in iOS 11. Swipe up from the bottom edge of the screen and you'll see an all-new Control Center interface that consolidates controls from previous versions into a single mosaic of control tiles. It reminds us of the original Windows Phone's tiled interface, and we like the look. The tiles can be 3D touched for more options, and you can customize what appears in the Control Center from the Settings app. That level of customization is great. Some have criticized the new Control Center for being too busy. True, it's a new spin on the familiar iOS design, but we're optimistic. We particularly like the volume and brightness sliders, which seem like a smart new way to present these controls. If anything, we'd like these options to be even more powerful. Android, for example, lets you select a wireless speaker or a different Wi-Fi network from its Control Center equivalent in the notification tray. We hope Apple moves in this direction, but the new Control Center isn't there yet. Since it launched, there has been mounting concern that the Control Center settings for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth aren't as functional as they might appear. At the time, it was widely reported that switching off Wi-Fi with these controls didn't actually switch off the radio. A recent update now alerts users that Wi-Fi will be automatically reactivated a day after it is switched off. That's great. However, we'd love to see Apple adopt Android's notification tray control for Wi-Fi, from which you can not only toggle the radio on and off but also select a Wi-Fi network without having to open the settings pane. The most noticeable feature in Android 8.0 Oreo is fine-grained control of notifications. Apple also tweaked how notifications worked, but in a confusingly un-Apple-like way. Swiping down from the top of the screen now reveals your notifications on the lock screen, without actually locking the device. Swipe up and you'll see older notifications. Swiping right from here or from the home screen still, thankfully, reveals the widget screen, but the search bar is gone from the top. It's a bit disorienting, even to long-time iOS users. We much preferred the paradigm of a separate notification center. While we're sure we'll get used to the new gestures, the notification area's similarity to the lock screen just feels unnatural. Improvements to messages between iOS devices are still end-to-end encrypted, but as of iOS 11 they are now backed up to the cloud. Normally, this would set off our privacy paranoia senses, but Apple insists that its security model prevents anyone other than the people sending or receiving devices from reading these messages. Even Apple, the company says, can't read them. That's excellent, and Apple's continued commitment to privacy and security in this age of mass surveillance, cloud storage, big data, machine learning, and voice assistance is heartening. The Messages app is also getting new visual effects, as well as a redesigned app drawer that will, hopefully, make the experience less messy. One neat trick: the app drawer expands and contracts at a swipe, similar to the magnification effect with the macOS dock. Apple Pay. Apple Messages continues its assault on Facebook Messenger, which was abundantly evident in the last iOS update with all its stickers and apps. This time, person-to-person payments, such as those long available in Messenger, make their way into Apple's Messages app. This feature was rolled out with the iOS 11.2 update, so get that if you haven't seen this feature already. Called the Apple Pay Cash, sending money is now a simple matter of tapping an Apple Pay icon in Messages app drawer during a chat session, entering an amount, and tapping Pay. You can either request cash from the recipient or simply send money. Each transaction is authenticated with Touch ID. While you interact with this feature through Messages, the transactions are handled immediately on the back end. That greatly reduces opportunities for a replay attack, and transactions use the tokenized security that debuted on iOS 8 with Apple Pay. Along with this new payment option comes a virtual prepaid Apple debit card which lives in your iPhone's Apple Pay wallet. You'll know which one it is because the card shimmers with a subtle but elegant animation. The money you receive is deposited into this card, which is accessible from the wallet app. This is a real, honest-to-goodness debit card, backed by real, honest-to-goodness bank. Green Dot Bank, in fact. You can apply your balance on this card to any purchase you make with your iOS device or cash it out to a bank account. This service is limited to the US at launch and will require you to provide some identification to sign up. It also only works between Apple devices, so don't deactivate out your Venmo account just yet. X marks the spot. This year is not like other years, as Apple decided to not only release the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, but an Ultralux iPhone 10. This distinctive and expensive iPhone sports a full-face screen, but also has a few unique tricks up its sleeve. iPhone 10 owners, for example, unlock the devices with just the faces with the faces scanning Face ID. This takes the place of Touch ID on the iPhone 10, as the device does not have a fingerprint scanner. Face ID can also be used to authenticate purchases. This is an interesting idea and one that's been tried before on various Android devices. That said, we have some privacy concerns about using Face ID instead of a fingerprint. Along with its face scanning abilities, the iPhone 10 takes emoji to the next level with Animoji. These are supersized, 3D emoji that replicate the movements and expressions of your scanned face, to the point where you can make them talk and sing. There are third-party apps that provide similar functionality, but Animoji are baked right into the iPhone 10 experience. Tweaked and refined. Along with these marquee additions are tweaks and updates to existing iOS features and included apps. There's a lot to go through, so we'll skim through the most interesting stuff. The Notes app, which has seen a surprising amount of investment from Apple, is getting handwriting and improved drawing support. You can also now search handwritten notes, as long as those notes are in English or Chinese. A document scanning feature lets you quickly capture .deb files, automatically cropping and correcting the image once it's captured, similar to the Adobe Scan app. Also pushing into Adobe territory, iOS 11 includes new PDF markup tools for Pencil and iPad users, saving you from downloading the Adobe Reader app. Your digital writing tool can now mark up assigned PDFs. Safari lets you capture websites as PDFs by tapping an action button with the Apple Pencil and then doodle over them, similar to the way the Edge browser's Web Note feature works. Little tweaks like this make the already impressive Apple Pencil an even more powerful tool. When you take a screenshot in iOS 11, a preview appears in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Swipe it away to store it for later, or tap it to start marking up or sharing the screenshot immediately. You can also drag and drop the screenshot onto the app of your choice. These are great new conveniences for an often used feature. Apple Maps gets improved indoor navigation and a new feature for improved safety while driving. Your iPhone can now automatically determine when you are driving using its onboard sensors and suppress distracting notifications. Your phone can send automated responses explaining that you are too busy being a safe, responsible driver to answer the text just now. Siri can even detect when you are driving and won't ask you to look at content on the screen in response to queries. The voice assistant will read it aloud instead. Speaking of Siri, Apple's voice assistant sees additional improvements in iOS 11. Just by saying, "Hey, Siri," you can translate English into Chinese, Spanish, French, German, or Italian. Siri speaks out the translation and puts the transliteration on the screen in case you want to try it yourself. Translations also have a replay button, in case the person you're speaking to doesn't catch what Siri says the first time. A subtle tweak to Siri is in the assistant's voice, which now has different inflection and tone. For example, it now says phrases with a more natural intonation. It's noticeable, perhaps too much so. Siri is right at the edge of an oral uncanny valley. On the more visual end of Siri's abilities are improved cards with more information and options to continue. Last, and possibly least, a new animated 3D icon seems to imbue Siri with an eerie intelligence. Remember the discarded Windows 10 feature, Wi-Fi Sense? Apple now offers similar functionality, letting you effortlessly share your Wi-Fi password securely to people in your contacts list. Doing so won't reveal your password in the process, and saves them the trouble of typing it. To use the iOS 11 feature, the visitor selects the friend's Wi-Fi network and moves the phone near any Apple device logged into it. A message pops up on the home user's screen offering to share the password. In our testing, however, it worked sporadically, though our work environment is teeming with competing Wi-Fi networks. An extremely useful new feature helps you cut down on storage clutter. Go to iPhone storage section of the Settings app and you'll see an option to offload unused apps and auto-delete old conversations from Messages. The page also shows you which apps are the biggest. If you've ever struggled to update an iOS device because you were running out of space, these tools could be lifesavers. iOS 11 has several improvements to smart home controls, not the least of which is in AirPlay 2. Now, you can control multi-room audio, setting the mood right from your iOS device. An impressive list of audio equipment companies has signed up for AirPlay 2, including Bang & Olufsen, Bose, Beats owned by Apple, Polk, Denon, Bowers & Wilkins, and Definitive Technology. AirPlay 2 works with Siri and Apple TV, so you can shout your requests not only to Apple Music but also to third-party apps, though which ones will support it isn't known yet. Last on this list of tweaks, but certainly not the end of new features in iOS 11, is an overhaul to the App Store. A visual redesign now includes advertisement-like videos that autoplay without sound. Video previews for apps now play automatically, which sounds terrible, though this new approach at least feels respectful. The videos are muted by default. For example, games now get their own category in the App Store, an acknowledgement of the dichotomy that has always existed. A new editorial feature displays daily stories, including in-depth articles about apps and behind-the-scenes features. It's an interesting idea, but like the notifications update, this redesign is a bit off-putting, replacing previous versions' more concise layout. Augmented reality apps using Arcade. There are always a lot of behind-the-scenes updates for an operating system that appeal mostly to the developers who use them to build new apps. Apple's latest foray into machine learning is one such example, but more compelling for the average person is augmented reality, or AR. Apple has avoided virtual reality VR, while Google and HTC have dived in head-first with purpose-made head-mounted displays and special cradles that turn smartphones into stereoscopic VR viewers. Even Facebook has skin in the game with its purchase of Oculus Rift. VR is interesting, but as Pokémon Go proved, it's AR's mixing of real and digital that might be the most compelling. Apple isn't including any AR-powered apps of its own. Instead, iOS 11 boasts Arcade. This provides tools for developers to build their own apps, like a version of the holographic chess game from Star Wars that puts the Millennium Falcon's game board on your coffee table. Or an app from IKEA that lets you place virtual furniture in your real home. We tried the IKEA app and a cute game called Follow Me Dragon, and the experience was delightful, if imperfect at times. Apple's initial approach to AR doesn't require any additional cameras or sensors. Instead, it uses the single rear-facing camera on your phone to identify flat surfaces and onboard sensors like the gyroscopes to interpret movement. We've seen demonstrations, and it's remarkably well done. Hopefully more developers will leap at this new technology. That said, the current version of Arcade only works with horizontal surfaces. Google has invested heavily in cutting-edge AR and VR with Project Tango, as has Microsoft with its mixed reality and HoloLens initiatives. To get the full Tango experience, however, you need a phone or tablet with a special sensor stack. The results are astonishing, but adoption has so far been limited. Countering Arcade is our core from Google, which, like Apple's offering, uses just a single camera and existing smartphone sensors. We've only seen demos of these two technologies, but Apple seems to have a leg up for the moment. That's surprising, considering that Project Tango easily blows away the competition, as long as it has those extra sensors. How this will play out in the real, augmented world is yet to be seen, however. Growing and evolving while comparing Apple and Android is a lot like comparing apples and Oreos. Doing so does highlight each of the relative strengths and shortcomings. Apple still has an enormous edge with the App Store, which boasts compelling exclusives and first releases. Android is available on handsets that cover a spectrum of sizes and price points. Apple's consistency means that it can be easier to use and understand, while the customization of Android is simpler than ever, meaning users can bend it to their needs without a great deal of knowledge. Which you pick will have a lot to do with the kind of user you are and want to be, and what you're already familiar with. This year, Google sank its teeth into Android Oreo, which brings fine-grained notifications and improved performance to the world's most prevalent mobile operating system. It's a great update that makes Android much stronger. Apple went a different direction with iOS 11, including in-your-face changes like the Files app, slide-over multitasking, and an emphasis on turning the iPad into a serious work machine. In some ways, Apple is bringing over some of the best ideas from Android, such as access to a file picker. In other ways, it strikes out on its own, as Apple often does, to create new workflows in iOS 11 that are unlike current mobile or desktop experiences. It's a bit disappointing that the best and most striking features of iOS 11 are found only with Apple's high-end tablets. There's still plenty for iPhone users to enjoy, but it's either bold or curious that Apple has decided to double down on tablets, a category that has only shrunk in recent years. Apple has always done an excellent job of keeping iOS powerful, but approachable, and beautiful to use. That's still true in iOS 11, but what's remarkable is how well it handles the potentially mess-making inclusions of the Files app and additional multitasking features, as well as smoothly sliding into the new world of augmented reality. It does all this with aplomb and in ways that open new doors for lovers of Apple gear. Page 2. Getting in a bit late on Facebook Messenger, Google Wallet, and PayPal's action. Apple Pay Cash is the latest peer-to-peer payment system from a tech giant. Apple's mobile operating system has long had a tie-in with your credit card, thanks to the Apple Wallet app. Starting with iOS 11.2, however, the new Apple Pay Cash service lets the company play an even greater role in your finances. For those who are passionately dedicated to the Apple ecosystem, it has an appeal. But if you want to pay someone who doesn't have an Apple device, you're better off with a competitor like Venmo that offers cross-platform options, as well as more advanced payment features. What is Apple Pay Cash? Since iOS 8.1, Apple Wallet has let you pay participating stores and websites from your iPhone, touch-free, using a credit card that you connect with the service. It hasn't, however, been able to let you pay friends directly, as you can with Facebook Messenger, Google Wallet, PayPal, Venmo, and some bank apps. Unlike the previous Apple Wallet functionality, with Apple Pay Cash, you can actually store money in an Apple account, rather than just using Apple Pay as a conduit for a credit or bank card. Getting started with Apple Pay Cash. If you haven't already done so, you first need to download and install iOS 11, specifically 11.2. You can force the update by visiting Settings, General, Software Update. If not, a slider switch in the Wallet Apple Pay section of Settings lets you enable Apple Pay Cash. Once you slide this switch, you have to enter your Apple ID and password and accept a legal agreement stating that the services are provided through Green Dot Bank. The terms point out that Apple Pay Cash comprises two services: a virtual payment card and a funds transfer service. Pay Cash works with every Apple phone back to the iPhone 6, and on iPad starting with the Air 2 model. The service also works with all versions of the Apple Watch. Androids and other non-Apple devices are not supported. Note that you'll only be able to send money to other iOS users who have accepted the agreement, and you both have to have two-factor authentication set up for your Apple ID. Two-factor authentication provides additional security, but it's stricter than the other payment services' setup requirements. Note that setup also requires re-entering your credit card digits. After I completed these steps, I was asked to add a debit card so that money could be transferred to my new bank account. You don't have to do this to use the service, though. Ident. In all, however, the setup isn't more involved than it is with Venmo, though Facebook Payments is easier than either. How to use Apple Pay Cash. As with Facebook Messenger's Payments app, you send money via the Apple Messages app. The option is in the app tray at the bottom of the Messages screen. Just tap the A icon to open it. You then see a dollar amount that you can increase or decrease, and you can switch between paying and requesting. Venmo and Google Wallet require you to open the separate apps to make payments, so that's a plus for Facebook and Apple, in that you access payments from an app you're probably using regularly already. When I tapped Pay to send $1 to a colleague and then hit the send up arrow, I had to approve the transaction with a Touch ID finger press. Of course, iPhone 10 users will use Face ID. For sending this dollar, I paid a 3% fee, the same as with Venmo and other services, but that's because the payment was via credit card. If you use a bank debit card, however, you can avoid that fee. The chat entry says pending until the recipient receives the funds. You can also use Siri to pay someone, but that's something also offered by Venmo. Apple Pay Cash, thankfully, doesn't by default share your every transaction with a special-purpose social network, as Venmo does. With Venmo, unless you change privacy settings, any of your contacts can see exactly who you paid in a feed of transactions. Some may like this, but it seems like an invasion of privacy to me. However, Venmo offers a couple of important advantages over Apple's system. You can scan a QR code to verify your pay, and you can attach notes along with a payment. Venmo also lets you pay amounts smaller than $1, Apple's minimum. Google Wallet, also available for iOS, adds the ability to split payments among multiple recipients. If you receive money from a contact, it goes into your Apple Pay Cash virtual cash card. You can use that balance either by dumping it back into a connected bank account or to pay for something else via Apple Pay or Apple Pay Cash. Apple Pay Cash, Venmo, and PayPal can all be used to shop at online retailers. PayPal, which also owns Venmo, may have the upper hand here, as the leading internet payment service. The biggest advantage of Venmo, PayPal, and Facebook payments, however, is that they're platform independent. With any of them, you can send money to anyone, regardless of the operating system they use. And with any of them, you can make and receive payments from a web browser. Not so with Apple Pay Cash. If you're using Apple's system and want to pay an Android user, you're going to have to hand over dirty old dollar bills, for now. Should you pay the Apple way, Apple Pay Cash offers a relatively easy and secure way for iOS users to make peer-to-peer payments. But the tech giant is a bit late to the party, and, as with many things in Apple's history, the service lives in too closed of an ecosystem. In addition to that, Venmo, our editor's choice payment app, offers a richer slate of payment options. If and when Apple adds the ability to pay Android users, well, update this review.